Hello, we're here today from Twinkl's LGBTQ Working Group to talk to you about being LGBTQ inclusive in education and generally in your life as an ally. My name is Emmy, I'm a copywriter for Twinkl, and I've been bisexual for pretty much my entire life since I was a teenager.
Hi, my name is Simon, my pronouns are he, him, I'm gay and trans, and I'm a games artist for the Go team at Twinkl.
Hiya, I'm Faye, pronouns she, her. I'm an ally of the LGBTQ community, and I have a trans teenage son, and I'm a content writer at Twinkl. As an ally, how can we be there for others to openly talk about their identity and or sexuality?
I think that you obviously don't want to overwhelm people. You don't want to make them feel that you're making assumptions about their identity, because we all have our own. You can definitely just, be open to people in your life generally that you are an ally of the LGBTQ community. You can do that by mentioning people who are in the community, just talking about it generally, talking about news that relates to people who are in the community, not being afraid to talk about it, and then leaving that space for discussion if people want to talk to you. Hopefully it's really important not to perpetuate gender stereotypes, and sexism. Be yourself, be honest, be open, and that's the best you can do, really.
What I was going to say ties in quite nicely to that, actually, because I was thinking about how being a good LGBTQ ally means also being an ally to so many communities which that intersects. So, for example, I'm thinking about teaching in a primary school setting. Obviously, you do have a lot of interaction with the parents and guardians of the children that you're teaching, and it's about using inclusive language for that. There may be kids who don't have the traditional mum and dad, maybe people who come from a very, very diverse range of family backgrounds, and I feel like being an ally to kids who may have a single parent and kids who may be in care also ties into kids who may have two dads or two mums. I remember seeing a great thing from someone who is a primary school teacher in America, who says she uses the term the kids grown-ups, particularly with younger children, and I find that is great because it encompasses so many different things.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think so. I've been a teacher for over 20 years, and I think, as you say, Simon, definitely looking at our language, whether that's generally in the community or when we're teaching, I think making that as inclusive as possible shows that you're creating a safe space for whoever you're talking with. Inclusive language, absolutely, and that could be if you're talking to a colleague or a friend as well. And maybe you talk about partner. You're not making assumptions as to whether someone's even in a relationship, and if they are, then what sort of relationship they're in. And I think as an ally, taking a little bit of responsibility to improve your own knowledge about the LGBTQ community. That's easy for me to say because I've kind of been forced to learn a lot about the community because someone in my family is transgender. But I think even if that isn't the case, if you can really read up on news articles or learn about popular culture and be discussing those topics with friends and family anyway, I think it just shows again that you are an open, supportive ally. And get a badge. I've got a badge on one of my jackets that just says "Come out for LGBT." And again, it might be just a way of showing that you are an ally. During Pride Month, I had some posters up in the window. It just shows that you support the community.
I remember when I was a teenager in high school and seeing which teachers put up the posters that Stonewall had sent to our school was definitely a guide as to who I could go to talk about things with.
Yeah, that's really important, yeah.
I think in a primary school setting, the best way to be inclusive towards kids who may end up coming out as trans is to just have as gender neutral a classroom as possible. Not only does that benefit someone who may then later in life or as a child come out and say, actually, I'm this gender, it benefits
getting rid of those stereotypes benefits everyone. Yeah,
something that I've come across is teachers calling the class friends rather than boys and girls. That works particularly in early years setting, I think, when
nice.
you're introducing people to the idea of school, but also not splitting up class into boys and girls, because there may be kids that feel like they shouldn't be in the setting that they've been put in, or that they actually don't feel like they fit into either. If teachers want to be more LGBTQ plus inclusive but feel unsure about terminology and definitions, what can they do?
If I start on this one, because I've kind of been in that situation, certainly in the primary school where I was teaching several years ago, this was something we really wanted to address as a school. And it can be difficult to know where to start. If there's a member of staff who feels really comfortable, really knowledgeable, that's great. You can run in-house staff training and look at the resources you've got in school as well, so that everybody feels a lot more kind of clued up, and somebody on the team can help with terminology and definitions. But what we did some years ago is we used an external organisation called Diversity Role Models, who in our area were running workshops and staff training. They came in, and that was great because it meant that all the staff members together had received the same information, and we all were on that level playing field with what we understood about current terminology and definitions. I think teachers also can, there's a wealth of information that's really good quality on websites now on the internet. So obviously even at Twinkl we've tried to create some resources to help teachers. Stonewall's another great organisation who have got information about up-to-date terminology and definitions. The onus is on individuals to try to make sure they feel more comfortable with the terminology and definitions, but to share that as a staff and maybe get someone in from another agency as well to provide really high quality training so that everyone feels just more clued up and more comfortable. I think that's a really good starting point.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, like, for people who've not really got into this before, not looked into it yet, just that the main thing to remember is, the difference between sex and gender, because, these just get confused and the meaning gets blurred like all the time. We have our biological sex, how we're born, but then in terms of gender identity, there are a lot more things that you can be. So there's lots of different gender identities, including being a man, being a woman, non-binary, transgender. Our gender is more our identity in terms of how we grow up and society and what's formed over time, not necessarily our physical body. So that kind of is the difference. And you have your sexuality, of course, and you also have your romantic orientation as well, who you fall in love with, and who you're attracted to. That's kind of a basic overview. And obviously there's lots of terms within the community and it can seem confusing. It's a way of them finding people who feel like experience life maybe in a similar way to themselves and owning that. Wanted to also just to talk about the difference between someone who's bisexual and someone who's pansexual. So obviously the word bisexual originally used to mean attraction to genders. Nowadays we understand that gender is much more on a spectrum, and there's more than just being a man or a woman. You've got people who are obviously non-binary, gender fluid, agender, and fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Some people concerned that maybe the term bisexual excludes some people, and so especially among younger people, they often like to use the term pansexual to show that they are just attracted to all genders. They're really not bothered about someone's gender. It doesn't matter to them. But lots of people still identify as bisexual, and it's not that they are being trans exclusive or anything. They just see it, well, I'm attracted to more than one gender, and that's what that means as well. Everyone's different, so the language evolves over time, and it really just comes down to a matter of personal preference, your own lived experience. But it's a way of finding people that are similar to you within the community.
I know as a teacher we sometimes are concerned about which terminology we can use in the classroom. And not only does that depend on how confident we are ourselves at understanding the definitions and terminology, but of course it then will depend on perhaps the school's policy, the cohort, the catchment, the age of the children you're teaching, as a staff, what you've agreed upon. And sometimes actually, I think we three have said together that, again, particularly in primary school, rather than being too hung up on the terminology and the definitions, what's more important is talking about diverse families, diverse relationships, using inclusive language, having inclusive resources, making sure that stories represent the LGBTQ plus community. And I think if you're doing all of that, the terminology isn't, obviously it's great if you know it and you feel comfortable, and then it's certainly if a child were to ask a question, you'd be able to answer that comfortably, and that is important. But at the primary level, perhaps it's less important to worry about which terms you can and can't use and how to explain those terms to the children. Perhaps it's more important just to create that safe, inclusive, diverse space where you're celebrating diversity. And then perhaps when you have got an event like Pride or LGBT History Month, that's when you can be looking at what those terms actually mean and what that acronym stands for and addressing it then.